So the soil excavation input tab is divided into two main sections. We have the soil emissions and then we have excavation input. So the soil input refers to the biogenic emissions resulting from disturbing soil. Biogenic emissions are currently reported as out of scope under the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. However, we're sort of seeing indications that this may change in the near future, and as this might be a significant contribution to an archaeology organisation's corporate carbon footprint, we've decided to include it here so that that functionality is there if it starts being introduced into the reporting. And then the excavation input focuses on emissions from excavators and related equipment during excavation activities, and these emissions are primarily arising from fuel consumption, typically diesel, but we have the option to input hours of usage or meters cubed of soil moved. So as highlighted in the bill of quantities video, there is the risk of double counting emissions in this excavation section. So if litres of diesel for excavation equipment has already been input into the bill of quantities tab, you should not fill out this section. Also, if so that would be input in option 1 here in litres. If we also know the amount spent on diesel for excavator equipment, then this will be input in the bill of quantities, and we also again should not fill out the soil excavation input tab. If we only have monetary spend for excavators and plant equipment and it can be separated, then you will input the amount spent on other plant hire here, but use the soil and excavation input to make an estimate for the emissions from excavators, solely excavators and not the other plant and equipment hire. So this produces a more accurate estimation for the excavation emissions than inputting in option 2 on the bill of quantities. So hopefully that makes sense. So yeah, I guess to summarise that, we want litres of diesel consumed by the excavators. If that's not available, we want amount spent on fuel for excavators. Both of those are input in the bill of quantities. And if neither of those are available, then we want to input on this tab. However, if we are unable to separate the cost of hiring excavators from any other plant and equipment hire, then you need to ensure that if that's just one big lump sum that's been input into bill of quantities, you're not estimating the excavation on top of that. So I'm just going to run through the input for this tab. So first, input your name and the project code, the record type, and then the dates. So if we start with soils, first drop down is for country. The next drop down is for former land use, so what the land is currently being used for before you start disturbing the soil. So there's drop downs here, and the descriptions of these drop downs can be found to the right of the table. So here we've got the land use descriptions, the soil type descriptions, and then also a definition of archaeological activity versus archaeology and other development purposes. We sort of briefly covered that in the bill of quantities video, and I think in the introduction as well. So let's just say former land use was woodland and the soil was organic minerals. So we see here this is a dark grey box, which as with across the rest of the tool, dark grey box means you shouldn't write anything into the box. So this, if it was organic soil, then we want to input into here the number of months that peat will be, if the peat is being removed and then put back into the same place, and then we want to put the number of months that it is expected to be outside, the number of months the peat will be stored before being returned. So this is because when organic soils are removed and reinstated below the water table, carbon loss to the atmosphere can be quickly stopped. So, but for non-organic soils, it's a lot harder to stop this carbon loss, and so there's not an option to input the months of removal for non-organic soils, but there is for organic. So let's make the time period a bit longer and say that it's 1 month. And then if we go down, as we can see in the yellow box, the definition of archaeological activity and development purposes is across here. So archaeological activity refers to any area that is just devoted to activities done by your archaeological organisation, and the area wasn't planning on being developed anyway. Alternatively, if you're using area for archaeology and other development purposes, this is areas where the activity might happen at the early stages of a project, but that land was going to be changed anyway by the end of the project. So it's so that those emissions aren't entirely allocated to archaeologists simply because they're the first people to go onto the site. So here we have an option for the soil less than 30 centimetres or 30 centimetres or more. So we can choose what unit we want to do it in. So let's just choose metres squared. So if it's less than 30 centimetres, and let's say more than 30 centimetres. So if we then want to input some excavator emissions, then this can be done either in metres cubed of soil moved or hours in operation. So let's say hours in operation, 100 hours, not being very imaginative with my number choices. And if we've got an electric excavator moving 10 metres cubed, and then if we add this in, so here is a warning ensuring that you're not double counting with any data that's been input into the bill of quantities. So yeah, please ensure that you've not entered the fuel consumption for excavators in other aspects of the tool. So if this data has not been included elsewhere, then we want to continue. So if we then go to the emissions database, we can see the soil inputs here. So if we scroll across, we've got peak monthly loss, we've got 1 month, and so yeah, 100 and 100, and all our data is in there with the emissions across the site. And so if we then demonstrate a recall, let's say number 15, same as all the other ones, just input the number, I don't know, incorrect units, let's say, input my name again, always does that, doesn't it, and let's adjust the units to metres cubed, and add it in. Same error message, just click OK. Don't just click OK. Click OK if it's not being double counted elsewhere. And that's, yeah, soil and excavation input.